we are probably 24 plus hours now going on no updates on the Brandon Aiyuk front. It's been the one of the number one storylines in the NFL this entire offseason is, will Brandon Aiyuk be traded? And for the longest time, I have been pretty adamant that I don't think that is going to be the case, that the 49ers have their focus set right now on winning the Super Bowl, and Brandon Aiyuk being on the roster, even if he is a little bit disgruntled, even if the future is a little bit cloudy, that his presence in San Francisco is just better for the team. So that I didn't think that they were going to make a trade, but earlier this week, there were reports from NBC Sports that the 49ers have a trade framework in place with both the Patriots and the Browns for an Aiyuk deal. And the reporting at the time additionally was that really the 49ers were just waiting on Brandon Aiyuk to figure out what the contract looks like there and whether or not he wants to play there long term. And considering that was sort of the kicker that we were waiting on and we haven't gotten any updates since then, kind of feels like Brandon Aiyuk isn't necessarily sold on either situation. Now, the reports have already come out that the Patriots are no longer pursuing an Aiyuk trade, again, because Aiyuk wasn't looking forward to playing with the Patriots. They were one of the two teams, it was them and the Browns, for having this framework, and I can't necessarily blame Aiyuk for not wanting to play in New England. You look at specifically on that offensive side of the ball, there are a lot of question marks, and this is a work in progress. The offensive line is objectively bad, and you don't feel like, at least I don't personally feel like, there is all that much upside for a short-term solution. Made a couple changes this offseason, but still is probably going to be one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL this upcoming season. The quarterback situation is probably what Aiyuk is most focused on, and there aren't a ton of certainties there either. Jacoby Brissett is going to be the week one starter for New England, and I think that he's going to be a solid option for however long he is at the helm there. But Brissett on just a one-year deal. The clear plan is for Drake May, who the Patriots took with that third overall pick, that he is eventually going to be the successor and the team's franchise quarterback, but it's not like the reporting around May in training camp has been all that positive. And, either one of those options in Brissett or May, Aiyuk probably isn't sitting here feeling like either one of those options are going to be even, in the top 16, the top 50% of the league for this upcoming season. So that's definitely a concern. And their offense has a lot of issues. I will say this, people really talk down on their wide receiver core, which is fair. It is very underwhelming as things currently stand. But I feel pretty adamant that if this receiving core were to get a legitimate number one guy, then we'd be looking at this entirely differently. Because I think that Kendrick Bourne is a solid number two wide receiver. He's been very effective when he's played. Demario Douglas, 6th round rookie last year, so isn't exactly on a ton of people's radars, but he looked really impressive. Looks like he could be a slot guy for the future as long as he can stay healthy. He was dealing with a bunch of injuries throughout the course of the year as well. You have a good tight end in Hunter Henry. If you were to add Brandon Aiyuk to that Patriots wide receiver core, I just don't think it's seen as the worst in the league, which is sort of the common reputation right now. And the Patriots were willing to, at least the reports were that the Patriots were willing to give Brandon Aiyuk top 5 wide receiver money. Now, obviously, the fact that Aiyuk is saying no to the Patriots, it's far more about the playing system than it is the money itself. But that does sort of delve into a further conversation of what is it that Brandon Aiyuk is hoping for. Because you look at his current situation in San Francisco, And he has a golden opportunity to win. And while he's not necessarily the undisputed number one option, there are so many mouths to feed between Deebo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk, George Kittle, and Christian McCaffrey. But he knows that he has a great chance to go and win a Super Bowl this year and be in a high-octane offense. So the fact that he is sort of being so vocal as things currently stand in that situation where he knows he could play out the season, hit free agency next year, and probably get that top 5 to 10 wide receiver money. And the fact that he is so disgruntled in San Francisco, now there is a very good chance that it's partially due to just being fed up with the negotiation process and that he feels slighted and disrespected by San Francisco. But I think that, on one side you have him turning down pure financials in New England, and in terms of play style and winning and competency on the offensive side around him, he has a great opportunity in San Francisco as well. So I am really curious what Aiyuk is looking at during this negotiation process and talking about what he wants. The other teams that are involved here are the Cleveland Browns, and supposedly the Pittsburgh Steelers have reinserted themselves into the conversation during that initial report about the framework that the 49ers had turned the Steelers away because they weren't willing to give up the compensation that the 49ers were looking for. So I kind of felt like this Browns deal was kind of the obvious move, that Cleveland would trade Amari Cooper and a collection of other draft picks to acquire Aiyuk. They get their long-term wide receiver one. Amari Cooper, still a very capable receiver, but now on the other side of 30, they feel like they want to sort of reset the market a little bit, have their new guy get younger, and have that top-end talent for years to come to put alongside Deshaun Watson. Now, I'd be curious to hear what Aiyuk and what really any of the wide receivers currently in the NFL, where their stance is on Deshaun Watson as things currently stand. Because obviously Watson, you take all of the off-the-field stuff out of the conversation, for starters, Watson has been very disappointing since he's taken over. Now, very disappointing considering the fact that he got a fully guaranteed contract for as much as he's getting paid. So he's definitely not lived up to that contract. But I do think that if he can stay on the field, he can be somewhere around that, middle of the pack quarterback, which again is obviously a disappointment when it comes to trying to justify the contract that they gave out. I just don't know if that's ever going to be a possibility again. But he's locked in for a number of years to come. Cleveland is probably going to try and squeeze everything they can out of that contract. So Aiyuk, I would think, would feel like there's going to be some sort of stability at the quarterback position. Now, again, I can understand the drawbacks with that as well. Watson, it's hard to ignore everything that went on off the field. Last year, there were some questions about his leadership and the playing through injuries. Now, he ended up suffering that season-ending injury, so I don't know if those conversations were ever really fair in the first place. But, it does feel like there is a plan for the Browns for the next few years at quarterback. And, we'll have to see how that ages with Deshaun Watson, but it seems like there's going to be stability at the position. There's a number of other different weapons on that offense as well. You look at David Njoku from the tight end position, Nick Chubb, if he can return to the version of himself that we saw prior, one of the best running backs in the league, if not the best. I think that him and Christian McCaffrey were sort of in their own stratosphere at the time of Chubb's injury last season in week 2. So a lot of talent on that Cleveland roster, and I feel like that's somewhere where Aiyuk could sort of slide into. And then the other team that is reportedly still in the mix is the Pittsburgh Steelers, where I think that it is really messy in terms of what the long-term plan looks like there. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields make up their quarterback room at the moment. There's no guarantees either one of them are in Pittsburgh next season. And the early reporting on training camp has been that Russell Wilson is the projected Week 1 starter. I think that internally for Pittsburgh, I think that they are hoping that Justin Fields sort of wins that job and that they have a chance to have a franchise quarterback in Fields. We'll see about that. I forget who made the point. It might have been someone on the NFL Ringer show, so apologies, not trying to plagiarize here, but I did hear a little bit of an interesting talking point about the Steelers had signed Russell Wilson to a deal in free agency first and then made the trade for Justin Fields when it was sort of staring them in the face and all they had to give up was a 6th round pick, that they probably feel like they have a little bit of obligation to not go back on their word with Russell Wilson. But I do feel like Fields is sort of the better option for Pittsburgh. But even with that being said, there's no guarantee that works out either. So I think it's just a very interesting conversation. The Steelers would have to up their package according to the reporting early on in this contract negotiation. I don't really know, considering the fact that the idea was that in return the 49ers would get a veteran wide receiver and draft compensation. I'm not sure if the Steelers necessarily have that vet that the 49ers would be looking for that they could fully utilize for this upcoming season. They've had a lot of turnover in their receiver room the past couple years. Their wide receiver 1 right now is George Pickens. Now maybe you look to a Van Jefferson, who's definitely a veteran. I don't know if he's high end necessarily, but I think that maybe a Van Jefferson deal with some picks could be what the 49ers are looking for, but still, I'm not sure if that's going to be enough there, and we're not sure if Aiyuk wants to end up in Pittsburgh either. Sounds like Aiyuk really wants to play with Jaden Daniels in Washington, but Washington was the one who removed themselves from the conversation, and the 49ers, because the 49ers were asking for more than the Commanders were willing to give up, but from the 49ers perspective, they're not really looking to hand out any favors to Aiyuk or Washington, where you're under contract right now for the 49ers. They're trying to win a Super Bowl. As much as they would like to, best facilitate a deal that results in a win-win, they have some pretty big stakes on the line right now this year. We talked at length about the fact that their financial clock is ticking a little bit, waiting for that Brock Purdy contract to eventually come in and sort of reorient the financial structure of the team. So, I don't know. I'm sort of leaning back into my initial thought that this deal isn't going to be done, but I'm surprised that we are still talking about it this late into the offseason with preseason starting. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section, where you would want to see him end up. But I think that he's going to end up playing out the season in San Francisco and then make a big splash move in free agency next year. But we are going to be now previewing the upcoming season for the Philadelphia Eagles, who had some noisy dysfunction voiced out by ESPN just yesterday in the disconnect between head coach Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. So I want to talk about how that could impact this upcoming season, talk about their key off-season moves, and ultimately dive into their schedule and predict their regular season records. So stick with us and we will be right back after this quick break.